first things first, in order to be able to help people sort of, understand things as we're moving on, we need to define some terms. Firstly, what's the difference between information security and cybersecurity? Well, as you can see from here, information security is sort of like the umbrella term. It's more focused on protecting information, right, in all its forms, right? Whereby cybersecurity is a subset of information security that is mainly focused on digital systems, networks, and devices, and does that by managing information technology risk, right? The CIA triad are the key principles of information security: the confidentiality, which again you think privacy, sensitivity, or secrecy; integrity, which is again think around things like authenticity, completeness, validity of whatever you are interacting with; and availability is just something being available for an asset being available for use when you need it to, and think accessibility and timeliness, right? The other important principles of information security are identification, authentication, authorization, and auditing, right? Then again, zooming into IT risk, the terms that will be used a lot, because again, you have to look at information or cybersecurity from a risk perspective, especially when you want to interact with, like stakeholders, board members, and all that, right? You can't just come and start throwing terms all around. You have to speak in a language that everybody would understand and be able to take action. Because again, if you want them to sign the checks for your cybersecurity tools and security controls, you need to be able to define things to them in a way that they would understand. The major terms that need to be understood are assets, which is something that is worthy of protection; vulnerability, which is a weakness or absence of a safeguard for that asset, right? A threat is a potential occurrence that could cause an unwanted outcome. Now, you probably heard me say threat actor like a few times. That's just a type of threat, right? There's other threats out there. There's also insider threats. There's availability threats and all that. So again, the next thing is risk itself, right? And risk is when a threat exploits a vulnerability, and that's the definition in the simplest terms, right? And an exposure is the likelihood of an asset loss due to the fact that a, a vulnerability has been exploited by a threat. Then there's control, safeguard, countermeasures, which again, that's basically easy to explain. So we're going to look at some of the security events that we've seen in the news for this year. The major ones are, now again, I like to read the information security news a lot. So on a daily basis, there's at least 5 major things happening. But these are the major ones for the year, right? So there's Ivanti, which is an edge or perimeter device vendor, right? Again, when you think perimeter device, think like a gate, protecting the flow of information in and out of an organization, right? We're seeing, there was an exploit back in January, and again, we see this was the UNC 5221 is a Chinese-based threat actor that was able to exploit a 0-day and get a foothold in the organizations' networks. That's organizations that have Ivanti as a perimeter device, think firewall or VPN, right? Then in February, there was the Change Healthcare ransomware event. Now, Change Healthcare is a subsidiary of the United Health Group, right? And The COO was quoted in Congress saying that this affected a third of all Americans, right? Black Hat, Alpha V, these are well-known threat actors, and they run a ransomware as a service operation. Again, these are not people you want to get like a communication from, right? Well, in that event, 6 terabytes worth of data um, was exported, was stolen by the threat actors, right? And I can remember clearly on that day, all medical outfits, pharmacies, hospitals, and all that, they had serious issues processing payments. So it was a really serious event. And the Screen Connect remote connection exploit, which is one of the things we're going to explore today, right? Screen Connect is a remote access tool which basically allows remote system administrators or authorized individuals to access their devices from anywhere in the world, right? But again, think about if a threat actor has access to do that too, that's a problem, right? AT&T reported that they had a data breach back in March. 73 million records were with sensitive identifying information were leaked, right? Again, by far one of the major ones, in the first half of the year was the Snowflake data theft event, which came about because um, one of their employees had an information stealer malware on their device, right? And the threat actor was able to get into the cloud instance and exploit and use stolen credentials to exploit the customers. Now, again, these are some of their customers. One thing that was clear is all the customers that were impacted, they did not have, you know, additional security measures set up. And unfortunately, Snowflake did not enforce that, right? Did not enforce, oh, you have to set up, access control policies. You have to set up MFA at the very least. They didn't enforce that. So it's more like a 50-50 blame. There was the event that happened yesterday, CrowdStrike. Now, while that wasn't like a threat actor initiated event, it was it impacted, one of the major um, pillars of information security, which is availability. There were grounded flights. I actually recall because I went to the ATM and I saw my ATM with a blue screen of death. Yikes. So, yeah, again, we are seeing more and more um, activity by threat actors. And again, we'll see, the next page here will tell you how we're seeing most of these threat actors getting a foothold in the network, which is the initial access, right? In 2023, the vulnerability exploitation, which is again probably, one of the more difficult ones to track because again, if you have a 0-day vulnerability, which is basically an undiscovered or recently discovered vulnerability before one is able to patch it, even if you have the best security program in the world, right? If you have a 0-day vulnerability, that means threat actors have information on how to exploit access and get access into your network. And for any sensible organization, even if you have a patch for a vulnerability, you still have to test it out before rolling it out. You can't just say, oh, because again, you don't know what effect it will have on your organization. So threat actors don't care about that. They just go straight for the kill. So again, they're seeing vulnerability exploitation become, a vehicle of choice more and more for threat actors. Phishing is still in play, credential theft and all that. Again, as we probably know, if you interact with a phishing link, one of the more end goals of the threat actor is to steal your credentials, right? So again, I try to classify phishing stolen credentials as, maybe the same thing. And of course, there's some other, prior compromise, brute force, web compromise, other ways that threat actors are using to get a foothold in the victim's network. So I'm gonna go through a demo. I did think about setting it up in real time, but in the interest of time, I'm just gonna go with pre-recorded videos, right? So the first demo is on screen connect vulnerability that we talked about that happened in February this year, which is um, there was an exploit or there was a vulnerability in a version of Screen Connect software and all earlier versions that any remote actor could just any remote threat actor could just um, run and exploit it and get a foothold, bypass authentication and get a foothold into the network, right? Um, as at the time when it was discovered, there were 3,000 endpoints publicly exposed to the internet. So again, think if you're working in an organization, your system admin uses this to sort of manage the computers and the organization, and they want to access it from anywhere in the world. They're one of those 3,000. So um, in this video, well, this is the exploit kit on GitHub. And again, easy instructions on how to do it. And we're going to just walk through a 30-second video on how it's being done. So in this video, there's the in the Kali Linux computer, which is on the left. That is where the exploit kit is being run, and the one on the right is more the device that has the screen connect vulnerability active on it. So just gonna walk through this. So yeah, that's on the right. You can see that's the screen connect page showing that they actually has that. The the pen tester is running the exploit kit. You see, and they basically specify the internet address of it, and you can see. So again, in here, the person has created a file and on their device and said to prove that this has been exploited successfully, drop that file on the on the device, right? And you can see this is the file that was able to be dropped on the device easily. So again, showing you how far vulnerability exploits have come, right? Then we're also going to look at AITM, which is a term for adversary in the middle. Threat actors have moved away from traditional phishing and okay, fake landing page, give us your credentials, then we go and try logging in later because a lot of systems now have MFA, right? And using a adversary in the middle technique means you can easily bypass MFA, right? Because again, what's good is having somebody's credentials if when you try to use it, it asks you for MFA. So well, I won't say beauty of Evil X is that, but the advantage of Evil X is that it's gonna capture all the credentials it needs, the username, password, the MFA, as well as the authentication token that is given after successful authentication and hand it all to the threat actor. So all the threat actor has to do is just get that link and the token and authenticate on their side. So again, Evil X has been around for a while. Very easy to set up and build something called fishlets, which we're going to explore in a bit. So, okay, I'm going to increase the speed a little bit, just in the interest of time. So this is the person running the Evil X, and there are fishlets. Fishlets are basically customizations of login pages, right? So there's Office 365. There's fishlet for Facebook, Instagram, anything you can think of, right? There's fishlet for Okta, and basically, you just run the fishlets and you get the login link or the link associated with, right? And that link is what you put in a phishing email. So let's continue playing, right? So the person runs and puts this link in there. So let's assume a victim has clicked on that link. Here is something that looks exactly like a Microsoft page, right? So the victim is, things they are logging into their Microsoft account. They're giving them the password, right? Then, okay, so I think this guy's restarting it again because there was an issue with it. So you can see it's asking for the MFA code. Again, this is not a Microsoft URL, right? It's just made to look like it's impersonating Microsoft, right? So on the back end, when all this code is received, right, it is captured and sent to the threat actor. And you see, that's the authentication token that was captured, right, and given to the pen tester in this case, right? So it's going to start a session. You can see it says it's already captured this, and it's going to run session 10, and that will give you a URL which will allow the threat actor access one's account, right? So again, these are two ways that threat actors that really seen use evolving use by threat actors. So let's just talk about the vulnerability for a second. A vulnerability exploit has increased by 180% as a method of choice in the past 1 year, and that's from 2022 to 2023. Of course, uh, you know, that's strictly for vulnerability. And when it comes to passwords, which still gonna be evergreen and was sort of like the prime choice in the past, there's 24 billion usernames and passwords out there. Um, Anybody can go to avibeinpwn.com and just enter their email address, and it will tell you, oh, you were affected by, like 10 different data breaches over the past, 10 years. So again, there's so much passwords out there, and for each breach that an organization costs, the average cost of it is 4.5 million, right? And again, whether you like it or not, there's a high chance that an organization will get impacted, especially if it's a bigger organization. So move on to the next, and look at the breach patterns. Basically, what we've been talking about. System intrusion is how you look at exploitation, right? It's seen a jump over the past 3 years. And things like web application are not really in vogue as much anymore. Social engineering been going up and down, still in use, right? And of course, how do the the threat actors need to monetize this, right? And the method of choice is some form of extortion, right? Either be it ransomware or just pure extortion. Extortion meaning that, hey, we have your data, um, pay for us or pay for it, or else we'll release it and sell it to people on the dark web, right? For example, the AT&T breach that I talked about with Snowflake was reported that AT&T paid $270,000 to get it, to threat actors, Shiny Hunters or whatever their name is. I think it's Shiny Hunters. Paid it to them to delete the information they have. That's 95% of all their customers, and they claim that they have. But again, how can you trust a threat actor? There's been cases of double extortion, which is when you claim you've deleted, then you still do things with it anyway. There's triple, there's even quadruple extortion, by the way. So threat actors are definitely making money from this, and again, it's important to understand that it persists, right? And you can see this is the projections of how much in trillions, not billions, of dollars, like worldwide, the cost of cybercrime is. So again, if this was a country's GDP, it will be only third behind USA and China, right? So again, it's quite lucrative for the criminals, but enter the cyber warriors, which again I hope most of us are on this call, to defend against that, right? So cybersecurity work gap, right? In the entire world, it's been estimated that you know there is a need or there's vacancies of about 4 million positions for cybersecurity positions to help defend against these threat actors. In North America alone, you can see it's projected to be about 522,000 positions. Right. If we move on to the next page, this was like a survey that was done with the security leadership, CISOs, and all that. The why can't they fill these positions? The overwhelming response was that the organization cannot find qualified talent. And of course, budgets, competitive wage, blah blah blah. Again, oh, excuse me. Okay. Again, it's important to have people in these roles, right? I keep hearing people say, "Oh, maybe AI will solve this problem." AI cannot solve this problem. We need actual people, right? Threat actors have all the time in the world. You need people that have, I don't know, 8 hours of their day dedicated to protecting against these threat actors. So again, to get into the cybersecurity space, I feel it's important to master at least one domain, right? Now, again, if you recall earlier, I said I was an expert in 5 domains, right? Ideally, for anybody trying to get into cybersecurity, I would say you need to master one domain very well, then maybe some sort of tangential domains. So, for example, if you want to be good at security engineering, then you probably want to get communications and network and asset security knowledge as well, because that will help you really perform at your job, right? But yeah, these are the 8 domains of cybersecurity according to ISC squared. And oh, excuse me. Again, just sort of reconfirming the things I said earlier about the cybersecurity workforce gap. This is a live look at the cybersecurity positions, open positions at the moment in the United States, right? Now, again, recall it was 522,000 for the whole of North America. We go into here, we can see right now there's 469 or 470,000 positions open, right? And of course, there are some states that have more job openings than the other. Again, just the typical suspects. Right? So, let's move on to the next page. This is how most organizations will look like, right? In terms of their security organization, right? And the subspecialties that they focus on, right? Again, depending on the size of the organization and their their market capitalization or how much profit how much the company is worth, right? Um, these are some of the departments they will focus on, and almost always security operations, you know, is the one thing that is typically there. Then, of course, GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. Then architecture and engineering, right? The bigger the company, the more you definitely see roles like that, right? And again, we're gonna now go into some of this organized, subspecialties of security, which we'll use to sort of help people understand that yes, there are job openings in security. There are various paths you can take. Not everything has to be technical, right? So, like I said, security operations is probably and they are probably the face of cybersecurity, especially in most organizations, because number one, they are the most important. Now, again, no shade to any other subspecialty, but if you start an organization without having, you know, like a SOC, then that's a huge risk you are accepting. So again, security operations, the objective is to reduce risk of cyber threats, minimize the impact of security incidents. Typical skills that are, you know, wanted by recruiters, right? You know, needs to know how to use a SIM. To know about network security, endpoint security. Solutions, vulnerability management, incident response, threat intel. Must know about access controls and must know security awareness and training, right? One thing I see is most people that come into like a security operations role, right, typically would be people that have done help desk, um, system administrators, network security admins, or analysts, IT support specialists, and law enforcement specialists, right? To get into these are some of the useful certifications. CompTIA, GIAC certification, which is run by SANS, CEH, CCNA, which is more like a networking certification. Then again, AWS, most cloud-based or cloud platform certifications. There's SSCP, which is run, CISSP, which is run by the ISC squared. Typical salary range, again, depending on what certifications you have, you can move up this range. But for an entry level position, typically range caps out at about 150,000. And again, if you're searching for these roles on, say, LinkedIn or your job search, these are the typical titles that you would see attached to them. Next is GRC, which is probably the most non-technical aspect of information security, right? Now, again, GRC is more about managing risk and mitigating organizational threats and vulnerabilities through risk and compliance programs. Policies, standards, and procedures are established, you know, with consultation with the organizational leadership and stakeholders. And again, these are integral to the security of any organization because they sort of empower the rest of the security um, employees to do their job, or the security specialties to do their job, right? So again, I, as a security operations person, need a policy or an organizational policy from the top that says we have empowered people that are security operations and security operations to do their job, right? If I say, oh, this person, their password is compromised, and I take action to maybe mitigate that, if I do not have the permissions to from the policy, then that's an issue, right? Again, so they work in language, they help enable users to the security as well as the organization to be secure by focusing on sort of like administrative type controls, right? And being able to communicate directly with leadership. Again, typical certifications that are sort of attractive to whoever is recruiting for these roles. Thinking CompTIA again shows up, CSSP again shows up, Jack shows up, then the certified information security auditor from ISACA also shows up there. Um, Again, you will see this salary range is a little bit higher as in the base salary range, the lower range of it, just because again this is a very sort of like intellectual type role, right? It's not technical, but it is a little bit taxing. So again, skills that are needed to succeed in GRC, designing, being able to design security controls, knowing risks, risk frameworks such as FAIR and yeah, such as FAIR and other sort of threat frameworks. Um, knowing knowledge of regulatory landscapes and applicable privacy laws and security laws. Now, again, there's all these laws designed, you know, think HIPAA, think SOX, think PCI, which again are all regulations and, you know, recommendations and laws that are put in place to help ensure that information is kept safe and secure, right? Somebody in GRC is probably the best to be able to interpret the requirements from these laws, right? Again, being able to analyze data because there will be a lot of quantitative and qualitative assessment of risk done. Being able to communicate with leadership, you know, cross communication, up, down, lateral, very much important than being able to have intimate knowledge about the particular industry you're working in. Typical feeder roles, you know, for people that want to get into that: financial analysts, internal auditors, lawyers, teachers, executive assistants, accountants, data analysts, technical writers. Again, this is not as technical, right? But again, it kind of demands sort of being in the know, right? So I'm gonna pause because apparently there's a question. Second. Okay, so in terms of, I see a question from Sharma Vidor and asking how to become a qualified person. But I think that's what we're covering right now. Again, if there's any sort of context I'm missing, then please just you can drop it. You can ask another question after. Okay. So we move on to the next domain: security architecture and engineering. Now, again, this could be separated out. This could be sort of, you know, combined together to be both security architecture and engineering. There's differences between both positions, though. An architect is more responsible for designing, building, maintaining security infrastructure of the organization, developing strategies based on prevailing risks to protect assets, right? Whereas an engineer is more, you know, will take information from, or, you know, recommendations from the security architects and, you know, implement, configure, and maintain, right? They monitor security incidents, you know, create detection rules and all that, and perform automation audits, assessments, pen tests, again, just to sort of assess the security of the organization. Um, Typical job roles and desired skills, you know, for either the architect or the engineer, you know, you must have multi-domain knowledge, right? So again, remember I said you need to have three, you know, as a minimum. For an architect or an engineer, the recommendation is you have 5 or 6, right? If you have everything, even better. um, and again, because of the move to cloud and just how interconnected we are right now and dependent we are on the internet, it's important to have cloud and network security expertise. Programming will come into play as well, just because, again, being able to design, uh, you know, solutions, automations would require some programming skills. Again, not as much as an actual software engineer, but again, probably you need that. You must have a good level of threat intelligence. And when I say threat intelligence, means you are well aware of what's happening, you know, in the security space, what the trends the threat actors are using, the news and all that, right? You must be able to know what vulnerabilities exist. You must be able to analyze stuff. You must be able to communicate, of course. Project management is also, you know, an optional optional skill, but it's something that would help you move a long way because again, you need to be able to execute projects like within the space, right? If you say, okay, I want to set up automation for detecting vulnerability exploitation, right? It's not something you just do in 1 hour. It's a multi-day, partnership process. So you must have that project management skills. Um, of course, knowing CMs as well would help, and knowing the regulatory landscape. For architecture, it's a little bit lower, right? However, one thing I've seen is architecture and engineering, they move up faster. And this is more for the entry. Like once you get in and you're able to prove yourself, you typically will get moved to the next pay gap, right? So in terms of job titles, typically if you're looking for this type of job, you're looking for penetration tester, vulnerability analyst, cybersecurity architects. Those are the type of terms that you want to search for, right? And again, from a certification perspective, CompTIA shows up again, CISSP shows up, CEH, very, very, very important. And having cloud certifications definitely important. Red Hat Enterprise Linux, because again, a lot of things you'll be dealing with, especially on the cloud side, will be Linux based. So good to good to have. The next aspect is sort of the identity access management. Again, this in the past was more purely technology function, right? But because of the evolution of cyber threats, this is more falling under the security function now. It's basically using technologies to manage access control to organizational assets, and protecting against unauthorized access to those assets, right? Um, Again, I am basically thinking permissions, managing digital identities, protecting sensitive data, and to maintain compliance. So again, from a skills perspective, you want to be able to do access provisioning, policy enforcement, auditing, cloud network security expertise works because again, a lot of things are moving to the cloud now, right? Programming, yes, again, would be very helpful just because it will help you be more efficient at your work. Knowing about risk management, knowing about data analysis, communication, knowing about system administration would also be useful as well. Typical feeder roles, system administrators, as expected, software engineers, cloud networks engineers, and enterprise architect. Um, this has a wider range, again, depending on the maturity of the organization, right? So, for example, if the organization is a small organization with just, some LDAP server that they use to manage, access, there's really not much work to do. But if you're out there, you need to learn AWS, you need to learn Azure, you need to learn Google Cloud, you need to learn OAuth and all these other sort of authentication mechanisms, then you're probably going to be getting the higher range of as a compensation. Again, useful certifications, you see CompTIA shows up, you see CISSP show up. IMI is more like a specialty certification, but it's identity management focused. Um, and again, if you're searching, these are the typical job titles that you want to look for. Application and product security. Um, Again, very sort of programming centric, right? What you want to focus, the primary goal is ensuring that applications are designed, developed, and deployed in a secure manner. Again, and you're thinking the SDLC process, secure software development lifecycle. Um, Desired skills, programming, obviously, knowing about web application technologies, such as OWASP, um, knowing about threat intel, knowing about vulnerability assessment, dynamic and static application testing methods, and project planning. Again, these are not things that you can, the projects within the space are not things that can be achieved on one's own. You need to partner with a lot of people to get them done. So, knowing about threat modeling, yes, then some of the feeder roles: software engineers, enterprise architects, DevOps engineer, solutions architects, and IT support analysts are people that typically will fit into that role. You can see the entry range is higher than most others, just because of the level of um, knowledge and expertise that is needed to succeed in the role. CompTIA shows up, CISSP shows up, cloud certifications also show up as things that you would be useful to have in your resume if you want to get into those positions. Typical job titles, as you can see, or if you're searching for. So again, just sort of wrap things up. Security is for everyone, or cybersecurity is for everyone, or information security is for everyone, right? There are non-technical jobs, right? For people that haven't really spent their lives like us, learning about networks and systems like that, and they have a lot to contribute as well. See on the left are non-technical jobs. On the right, we have the more technical roles, and in terms of even the non-technical jobs, there's also the physical security analyst, which again, think about if you have a network and you're like, oh, I have firewalls, I have this, I have that, but the door doesn't even have a lock. Anybody can go in. Like, what exactly are you protecting, right? So again, physical security is probably one that should be added in here as well. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.